Welcome to the Versa Business Tips Podcast. I'm your host, founder and CEO of Versa Business Systems, Shaheen Mazloom. We're here with a guest today that's going to teach us all about leadership, how to expand a business, how to get in front of more people, and really how to get in front of the ideal person that we really want to be in front of. So Dia Bondi, thank you so much for joining us today.
So happy to be here. Thank you. Hello, all
Absolutely.
small business owners, small, medium, and large size business owners.
Yes, absolutely. So for those out there that don't know who you are, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. So I'm Dia Bondi. I'm based out of the San Francisco Bay Area. I am a now I could legitimately say 24-year leadership communications coach. I have helped thousands of senior leaders and VC-backed founders secure hundreds of millions in decisions and resources. I've had the great opportunity to help Rio de Janeiro win the right to host the 2016 Olympics and worked in the Olympic movement multiple bidding cities and other bid leaders. And I went to auctioneering school a handful of years ago for fun, just as an adventure. And turns out that everything I learned after I started doing fundraising auctioneering, literally just as a impact hobby, I figured that everything I was learning in this funny impact hobby was super useful in how we think about how to ask for more and get it in our careers and businesses. And so now I'm an author of a book called Ask Like an Auctioneer, How to Ask for More and Get It. So that's where I live.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is very cool. So this kind of happened by accident.
100%. I put myself
amazing.
And look, business owners on, watching right now might have this familiar feeling, a little bit of burnout, when you come up against something. And I pulled the chute and put myself on sort of a low-level working sabbatical. I did a few coaching engagements, a few strategic projects that were interesting to me, but mostly I took 1 year off and I did two things. I did a book called The Artist's Way. If your listeners don't know about it, they should know about it. It's a book to help you reignite your creativity. And for me, I bring a lot of creativity to the work and consulting and coaching that I do. It's an important aspect of my business success. So I did that end to end. Actually, I did three things. I did a lot of push-ups. and I made good on a funny little threat I had made at a dinner table 10 years before that, what I would do? Like, I would actually learn how to be an auctioneer just for fun. And my husband reminded me, well, you're on sabbatical. Maybe now's the time to do it. So I went and did it. And absolutely, when I got back to the Bay Area, I started doing fundraising auctioneering specifically for women-led nonprofits and nonprofits benefiting women and girls. And about 30 auctions into it, I was like, wow. Oh, my two worlds are crashing together. And I saw then how I could help my clients ask for more and get it using what I've learned.
It's so crazy how that happens. That's kind of how I ended up in, starting Versa Business Systems completely by accident.
Yep.
To an extent, right? I had experience in the industry, and then multiple things happened, and that's boom.
Yep.
And then it just all kind of comes together.
I think it's sort of, to me, this is the definition of innovation. When you can take two great tastes that you can't imagine taste great together and smash them together to create something new. So I think for business owners who might be listening, don't quiet that voice inside that says, I want to learn something new. I want to take a weird painting class in my off time. I want to, to explore and run up against a lot of different experiences that you then can look for patterns in that experience that are useful to how you might be driving the success of your small business. Whether you're a one-woman show or you're a medium-sized business with a large staff, or you're innovating products that you have every day, it's very easy for us to stay in our lane. And I think that's dangerous when you need to continue to iterate and innovate inside of your own business.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you said the book was called An Artist's Way.
The Artist's Way, yes.
The Artist's Way.
By Julia
and you
Cameron.
brought up a really great point.
That's not the book I wrote, by the way. I don't want to take credit for that. That's Julia Cameron wrote that book. It was not me that wrote that book.
Yeah. I gathered that.
Okay, cool.
But, you brought up a great point, and being a business owner and growing a business, you've got to be extremely creative. Otherwise, one, you're going to end up just like everybody else and be, you can get by and you can do okay. But the ones that really make it are the great leaders and the ones that are innovative and creative. So It's funny. I grew up in a farming family. So
Mhm.
my grandparents had a cattle farm. So I've been around auctioneers my whole life. And I always used to think it was the coolest thing,
Yeah,
like
it's
me and my brother and sister would play auctioneer,
sure.
when we were at home,
Yeah. And
most
did
people
you
were
go to the like did
playing
you
house and we're playing auctioneer.
100%. Did you go to the live auctions at your local fair or
Yeah, I mean, we
sure.
literally once or twice a week we were at some sort of livestock auction.
So I actually did not. I grew up in a Northern California sort of hippie naturalist family where we spent
Hmm.
our weekends surfing, not spending our weekends, out on a farm. But the
Right.
way I got exposed to this was I have two kids. They're 14 and 17. And when they were little, we were part of a preschool co-op where it was sort of parent run. And
Hmm.
we had an annual fundraiser, and there was a need for an auctioneer. And everyone knows that in my business, I spend a lot of time on stages. I'm a professional speaker. I do a lot of facilitation. I'm in high stakes communications moments all the time. And so everyone knew that I'm not afraid of having a mic in my hand. And a lot of the other parents weren't interested. So they said, let's get Dia to do it. And so
Right.
we did it for the first time, not knowing anything about it. And I was like, that was fun. And then that's what led to my hey, what if my little bucket? It was sort of a bucket list challenge.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. So explain to us how asking for, so as an auctioneer,
Yeah.
your whole job is to sell whatever it is that you're auctioning off, right? For
Yes.
the highest
Maximum
bid.
amount. Yes. And
Right.
and to be fair, because I'm doing fundraising auctions, there's actually a second component, which is making a direct pledge ask. Some of the fundraisers I've done as an auctioneer, we're not selling anything at all. We're just
Right.
making a request for a pledge and putting
Right.
together a compelling story for folks to
Yeah.
be able to put their paddle in the air at 25,000, at 10,000, at 5,000, at 1,000, at 100, at $20, whatever it is.
Right.
That's the other way that we're making direct asks. Yes.
Right. And so when you're doing that, whether it's in a business sense or, for charity or an auction, what are you noticing that most people don't understand about asking when you're asking for something, especially when it's a large amount of money? What are the mistakes that you're seeing people make?
Well, I want to put a caveat that large is relative.
Yes, true.
I
Yep.
mean, your customers, the folks who are listening right now, what's large to you today probably looks, seemed impossible earlier. And what seemed large 5 years ago seems like table stakes for you now. So
Right.
large is very contextualized and very relative to where you are in your business growth, where you are
True.
into the leveling up that you're doing in your business and in the context of where you work or, what you're working on every day. So I just want to add that because it's easy for us to think about big asks just in sort of absolutes, but they are so subjective.
Right, right. Now,
So
I guess when I mean large, so a $10,000 ask for a business that does $100,000 a
sure,
year is the same as $1 million ask for a guy that does 10,
100
15, $20 million a year,
exactly. So
right?
so I just want to understand, for folks who are small businesses and they're making what feels like a big ask for them, their first $1 million client, or let's just say their first client, period. Because
Right.
that's a moment, or they're
Yep.
asking for exactly that. You're asking for that large investment. Your whatever ask you might make, if it feels big to you, one of the biggest mistakes I see people make, and what I saw when I started auctioneering, because what I'm not asking people to do is learn how to auctioneer. That's not what I'm
Right.
interested in doing. This is much more about seeing that in the years of my communications coaching work, what I'm basically doing is helping people put together a compelling story to create a particular outcome, and
Yep.
from them as a leadership voice. And I always have to start that coaching engagement with the question, what is it that you're asking for? And it's usually headcount, resources, in a level of engagement from somebody, an opportunity. People make in my skills workshops, people make it a little bit more personal, and they say things like an opportunity to get on a stage, a chance to run a strategic project at work that'll raise my visibility. Which, by the way, small business owners, the kinds of projects you run and how visible they are to your market does impact how you're positioned in your market. Okay. So
100%. Yep.
that's not just reserved just for employees. So when I ask that question, what I'm what I'm asked back is, well, Dia, what do you think I can get? And that might be a familiar question for folks listening. And it's a good question. But the problem is we end up designing an ask based on what we think we can get. We go make that ask, and then we get a yes, and we think we're awesome. But that's not what we do as auctioneers. That would be the equivalent of me saying, I'm gonna sell this piece of art for $10,000. Who's in at 10,000? They put their paddle in the air, and I say sold immediately.
And then that's it. Yep.
Because I'm aiming for the first ask of the first yes I can get. So what it means to ask like an auctioneer is to do this, is to ask and get a no. Because you saw it, Shaheen, in your childhood, I, as an auctioneer, cannot actually sell anything I'm offering to the audience until I get a no. I can say, are you in for this piece of art at 5,000? Who's in at 5,500? 5,000 at 5,500. Somebody's in at 5,500. I'm going to say 6,000. Are you back in at 6,000? And the person who was at 5,000, who I'm now asking 6, they say, no. I've just identified that now is the time to sell. Why? Because that no is great news. It lets me know I've maximized the potential of that ask. Yeah. But we don't do that in our careers and businesses and lives because we're afraid of the no. Yep. We don't want to experience rejection and humiliation of getting a no. And usually everything that lives between a mostly guaranteed yes and that absolute no, all those increments that live in there, I call that zone, everything that lives in that zone, I call that zone the zone of freaking out. Because it's that, for small business owners, maybe who are just starting out, you're in your, I like to call it the ZOFO, the zone of freaking out. Because if you're not in your comfort zone, where are you? Right. Small business owners who right now are maybe a year in, they're in their ZOFOs constantly. Whether you're raising, VC funding or you're pursuing that whale of a client, you just can't imagine, like, if everything feels like a Hail Mary, right? Mm-hmm. Well, when we're making asks that don't answer the question, what do I think I can get? But instead ask the question, what do I think will get me a no? You're going to inevitably end up with more, because either you're going to get the no and negotiate down a little bit and land somewhere above if you had reached for a guaranteed yes, or you're going to get a yes. And you're going to have your mind blown.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, I feel like we're all wired that to an extent, right? Until you realize what what's really out there and what the opportunity really is, right? Like, until you close that $1 million client, you don't need. It's just a thing that you want to do. You know what I mean? It doesn't seem feasible or even real until it actually happens.
It seems outlandish. And that's why at the beginning of this conversation, I was like, okay, but big asks are all relative, because what seems expensive to me seems cheap to you. What seems expensive to you seems cheap to me. And I'm not just talking about money. Okay. I'm talking about scope of projects. I'm talking about, I'm talking about making asks around all the kinds of resources that you might need to elevate the visibility of your business, grow your authority in a particular space, find intangible resources that can actually make a huge difference, along with the cash you need, like, it's all of those things.
Yeah, so 100%. Yeah, something has more value for one person versus somebody else.
And so a friend of mine calls this, like, you can't shop from your own wallet. You just can't shop from your own wallet, or you'll end up seeing everything through your own lens of what has value and what doesn't. And so I also on stage learned a bunch of strategies to help folks that I was using as an auctioneer. When I felt intimidated by a particular moment where I was like, should I just make one more ask or not? Is that enough or not? When I was in my zone of freaking out, I learned like 9 different things you can do to make sure that you go ahead and make the ask that's in your ZOFO and not just play small.
Right. Now, in a business setting, when you're on a stage and you're being called up on stage, most of those people you've never met, you don't know them from Adam. How can you read a room to be able to tell where that ask is? Or are you just going for the highest and then, hoping for the best?
Let me just tell you, all I have to do is ask and find out. That's all that's my single job. It is not my job to decide. 100%. Yeah. No, yeah. In my case, the best thing they can say is
right.
No.
The best thing they can say is no, because then you know where you're at.
Correct. So, I think we get trapped sometimes, and small business owners can get trapped in trying to game out every possible scenario and try to make it happen before it happens. And instead, we have to be willing to carve a path for our business to just go ahead and make the ask, and with curiosity and generosity and excitement and, connection. It's not about asking big in order to be extractive. It's
Yeah.
asking big to see what happens.
Right.
So I don't usually game out when in the auctioneering stage, I don't game out exactly, who I'm making the asks of. But I will say this, you've got to curate your audience. When I do a fundraising auction, which I only do twice a year now, the people that are in the room are the right people to be making the ask of. They bought a ticket. They put a dress on.
Right.
They brought their friends. They're there to support that organization. They're aligned with the mission of the organization. Now, let's draw that over to your business. We've got to make sure that we're making asks of the people who are aligned in our domain, that want the same things we want, that whose desires and aspirations align with what we offer in the world in a way that feels like there's an obvious or clear connection to be made. So we're not just throwing spaghetti on the wall. We're curating the audiences that we can make the powerful asks of, so that we have the best chance for the biggest ask to fly.
Yeah. Yeah. No, 100%. In my business, I've been trying to focus more on getting on digital stages, physical stages. I started with this podcast about a year ago.
Sure.
And so now I want to move more into the physical stages, doing, luncheons and, maybe conferences and things like that as I grow. Because being in front of an audience, whether it be digital or in person, now you have hundreds, if not thousands, of potential customers. Whereas a one-on-one conversation, you've got that one person that can say yes or no. Whereas when you're talking to a large audience, now you have the opportunity of a much bigger, a much bigger opportunity.
Yep.
Now,
you're talking about, I'm going to jump in here and say that you're talking about the kinds of asks, the requests you might be making that grow your influence in your market.
Yeah.
Like that is, there are 4 types of asks I hear people make that help advance their goals. Money asks, for sure. Authority asks that grow your authority.
Right.
3 asks that grow your influence. And that example you just gave is about influence, growing your influence. And 4 is growing balance, which isn't about work-life balance. It's about bringing into balance the work you do and who you are. So for example, we might have folks watching and listening right now who are like, oh, half my clients are just not right for me anymore.
Right.
So what asks might you make that help bring more into balance who you serve and what you want to do in the world?
Yeah, so true. So with the book that you wrote, tell us a little bit about that and what that outlines.
So the first section is literally about explaining the concept I just shared with you and folks who are watching and listening. What does it mean to ask like an auctioneer? It means to ask for a no and reframe the no as something good, not something as a liability. And to recognize that if you're going to do that, every single ask you make is going to be the one that is in the ZOFO. It's going to put you in the zone of freaking out because there's no guarantee. It is, you have no idea what they're going to say.
Right.
And you can get all those crazy feels about like, maybe they'll think I'm crazy, and my answer to that is, if you can explain it, you can ask for it. So that's sort of what the first bit is. And then I share 9 ideas I learned from the auctioneering stage to help you. If you're going to make the asks that put you in the zone of freaking out, how do you make yourself do it? How do you go ahead and push send? How do you go ahead and pick up that mic? How do you go ahead and book that luncheon with that prospect? Like, how do you go ahead and do the thing, Because you can't expect it to feel cozy. It never will. The definition of the zone of freaking out is that it makes you freak out a little. So we talk about the 9 ideas you can use to help you go ahead and do that. Ideas like, I'll just share 2. Can I share 2, Shaheen?
Yeah.
One is that, this is my favorite one, which is that price is a measure of value, not worth.
Yes.
A lot of small, medium-sized business owners, especially when they're just starting, take the answers they get very personally, because you are your business. You know, I mean, Shaheen, you're in this position. I am too, where we're the face of our businesses.
Absolutely.
And we are a personal brand, right? So, but we have to remember that price or what somebody will do for you or with you is a way to see what they value and how they value it, not a way to define your own worth or worthiness, because that's infinite.
Yep.
I've learned that from the world of auctioneering, because my clients would say this piece of art is going to go for 10 grand. It would go for 2. They'd say this vacation is going to go for 5 grand. And it would go for 25. Like, we have no idea what people value, but the asks we make can help reveal
depends on
that
the
to
audience
us.
as well, right?
100%. And the other idea that it's important, it's easy to go ahead and make the ask if you can be legitimately clear about what the offer is you have inside of that ask, and not from a transactional perspective, but from like a storytelling perspective. When you say, for example, when I make direct pledge asks, I'll tell people all the time, you know, tonight when you raise your paddle in the air and donate to this organization you care about, you have the opportunity to live in alignment with your values. You have the opportunity to be a hero to 25 kids who you'll be funding their summer camp, whatever. But we've got to make sure that we can be clear about what's in it for them. So that's the middle section of the book. And then the last section of the book is all about storytelling frameworks to help you set up the ask. And also a recognition, this is the last idea in there, is that you can use asking as a success strategy. So often we think, oh, I want to ask like an auctioneer, but I don't have a big negotiation coming up. No, you can design an ask at any moment. And in fact, I want you to have one at the tip of your tongue, so that when somebody says, oh, that's what you're building, that's so awesome, how can I help you? You have a meaningful answer.
Right.
Beyond like and subscribe, you know?
Yeah. So very true.
So
very true.
And I actually have a tool called the six step ask plan framework that will walk your listeners through the 6 prompts to help them design a strategic ask they can have on the tip of their tongue to help get to their goals faster. And I think you have the link to
yeah, I'll share that link in the description. Yeah, that's great. So the ask for me has never been hard. I don't have a problem asking. One thing that I have struggled with as I've grown my business, right? So as you grow, you tend to grow into larger clients, larger deals, bigger things, right?
Sure.
So when starting out dealing with small, medium-sized businesses, you know, you can get a hold of the owner pretty easily, and the owner is usually the decision maker. When you start getting into those companies that have 100+ employees, now the decision maker is a C-level executive, like a CFO or a head of HR or payroll or something like that. And oftentimes than not, that decision maker is going to bear no financial benefit from that decision, and it's going to be the company that bears the benefits. So it's like, so how do you create a sense of urgency and build value for that employee to make the decision when they're not going to be impacted personally one way or the other?
Well, I think it's a falsehood that they're not impacted one way or another. I mean, with all due respect, you know, like this is what I mean by we have to find the offer inside of the ask, beyond the transaction, beyond the deploy this product across your benefits packages and you're going to save 10%. For who? You know, it's for the organization. And the profile you're talking to is exactly my clients. I work with clients that have 40,000 employees globally, you know, and finding the decision maker is one challenge. The second one is exactly selling into them. And this is going to be about, straddling the needs and desires of the goals of the organization. So you need to know what those are. You need to know that last quarter they had a down quarter. They did, you know, maybe they went through a RIF and now they're trying to find efficiencies in other places so they can get, you know, stretched to next quarter where they think things will turn around. So you need to have context. Number one, so that you can speak to the needs of the business, regardless of the individual decision maker's need. And then you need to have the courage and curiosity to speak to the individual need of that leader inside the organization. For example, let's imagine that leader is new to the role. And this is their first, working with you might be their first opportunity for them to have their first big win in that new role. That has incredible currency for an executive who maybe maybe just stepped out from another company in a VP role and they're in their C
Yeah.
role for the first time.
Yep.
Know this.
Yep.
Know this. Maybe it means maybe their team has had a huge turnover. They just experienced a reorg. Well, what does that leader now want for their team that helps everyone win? Like,
Right.
we've got to be able to bridge the connection between the business objectives and the objectives of the individual leader you're talking to. Hear that? I hope
Absolutely.
that's
Yeah.
helpful.
Oh, 100%. 100%. But you are right. I mean, it is and it often is, no matter what type of business you're in. It's usually the limitations we set are the ones that we tell ourselves in our mind. 99% of it is a mindset. Whether we can or we can't, we're right either way, right? So last but not least, so auctioneers are often they speak very fast. Most of the time people can't understand them. Does that have anything to do with the strategy?
Zero.
Okay.
The last thing we want to do is confuse our
Right.
customer clients and collaborators.
Right.
We want to join with them and make them feel as, the experience working with you and engaging with you as connected and trusting as possible.
Yeah.
So yeah, when I've brought the keynote or the workshop Ask Like an Auctioneer to organizations, sometimes my stakeholders are like, wait, so are you going to teach people how to talk fast? And I'm like, no, has nothing to do with developing a chant. So
Why is it that auctioneers speak so fast and
it's
oftentimes you
funny.
can't understand?
So when I was at auctioneering school, it was 10 days in the Midwest. My instructors, some of them were like world champions because they actually have
Right.
competitions, which is kind of
Yeah.
wild. And if you listen to them, they're actually not speaking quickly. It's about where they take the breath and where they and a chant that they develop. So it's not that I'm talking more quickly, but it's that I'm talking continuously and I'm adding consonants in between things that make it full.
Interesting.
One of my instructors, his I'm going to do a terrible job because I don't have a chant. I can't have a chant. I work, my impact hobby of fundraising, auctioneering. Like, I'm working with families and art collectors and
Right.
philanthropists. Like, those are my audiences. They go to 1 or 2 galas a year. They're not sitting in the stockyard. You know what I mean?
Right.
They couldn't
Exactly.
they couldn't raise a paddle, in that kind with that kind of bid chant because they would have no
Right.
idea what they're paying.
Yes.
So yeah, it's not about speed. I had one instructor. His chant was like, $100 bidder now, do. Would you give me 2? I'm a $200 bidder now, 3. It was like that. But it's just the fact that it doesn't stop is what makes it
Right.
quick. Yeah.
Right. Interesting. I've always wondered that because I noticed there's a few auctioneers that I remember from being a kid, and they all had a different
Chant. It's called the chant.
chant.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so they just the chant is just in between the numbers.
Correct. And so exactly.
And what's the reason behind that? Is that just the way it's always been?
I never really got a square answer about that. I think it's about sort of the artistry and the entertainment of it. It's about because it's a show. I mean, look, I do a lot of art auctions. I don't have a full chant, but I do have a way I show up and ask for numbers,
Right.
And it's pretty powerful, and it's a rare thing to have a woman in front of the room. Like, let's be honest, like there aren't very many of us. So
100%.
I do one art auction every year in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we sell, I think the gallery sells 150 pieces that are hung on the wall, and we pull 10 or 12 off the wall to do just the live part. And it's the showmanship of it, it's the joy and the competitive competition of it. It's the show of the night that people look forward to. And I think people who develop a chant, it is about a distinct, there's probably a history there, but there is something about like a unique characteristic to that showman that shows up in their chant.
Right. Yeah. That makes sense. There's a showmanship, piece to it. Yeah, that makes sense.
I also heard a couple of auctioneers talk about how when you have a continuous chant, it keeps the momentum of the bidding coming even while people are thinking. So instead of having silence between while people are thinking about whether they're going to raise their paddle again, you're filling that time and letting them, what they call that crying. You just cry through it. You do some crying for a while, and that's not true in all auctions. I mean, you can look at some of the fine art auctions at Christie's
At
and
least
others.
a faster. Now that I'm seeing it and thinking about that, it's definitely going to lead to a faster response too, because there isn't that downtime. When you have a downtime in between questions, now you have more time to think about it rather than reacting.
Sure. Understanding that some of the fine art auctions that are run by Christie's and others, it's just a very different style. And there is quiet between taking a bid and saying where we are in the bidding process. But
Absolutely.
yeah, I think, I do, going back to your question about like, is talking fast sort of part of it? I'm going to say no. And the thing that I want to invite people to consider is that when we make big strategic asks that help advance our business, we can do it from a place of curiosity and generosity and clarity and connection. It is your job when you're making the ask to give it its best potential by using those things I just mentioned: clarity, connection, curiosity. It is not extractive, and it's an opportunity for you to make an offer that can make a difference to the people that are right across the table to you. I mean, everybody selling knows that selling is about solving problems.
Absolutely. Man, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I've never thought about auctioneer as a way of selling, and it makes perfect sense now that I think about it. And so I'm glad we had this conversation. Can you, for our viewers and listeners,
Sure.
you have a tool that our viewers and listeners can download. Can you explain us where they can find that and what that tool will do for them?
You bet. So they can go to diabondi.com/Versa. It is especially for your listeners. And you can find something there called the Ask Plan. It's a free download. Now that you know what the ZOFO is, you're going to, because that's the one sort of insider language in there. If you know what that is, then you're going to be able to use this tool successfully. And the point of it is to help you design a strategic ask you could use right now in your business to help you move forward. It's a simple 6 steps, but it is proven to be a useful tool. I use it all the time. When I find the resources I want and I secure those and I move my business forward, I then sit down and have a conversation with myself about what's the next thing I could ask for? What am I looking for to help me get to the next step? So that's available for you. Again, it's at diabondi.com/Versa, VERSA.
Awesome. And I'll make sure I include that in the links, everybody, or in the description, so everybody can get
Also,
that. I'm going to get it right after we get off this, because
cool.
It's always a great thing to have. I mean, if you have different ways that you can ask for the same thing, and you have a foundation that works, you're better off using that than asking it the 20, 30 other ways that you've asked before. So I appreciate it.
You bet.
Thank you very much. You have yourself a great night. Hopefully you guys get some relief down there in San Francisco over the next few days.
It's 100 degrees here. That's a rare moment around here. Thanks so much for having me. And I hope everyone learns how they can ask for more and get it.
Absolutely. I appreciate you. Thank you.